Hi, and welcome back to Continue the Conversation. I am your host, Tega Ororo. When we talk about politics, most people jump straight into Washington. But the truth is, decisions that impact your rent, your neighborhood safety, public transportation, your water, your streets, those decisions are often made much closer to home. Today's conversation is about local power and what it really means to represent a community. I'm joined today by my friend, my mentor, Detroit City Council member Denzel McCampbell, who represents District 7. Before stepping into elected office, Denzel was deeply involved in advocacy and organizing, working on issues like voting rights, environmental justice, and access to clean water. Now he's bringing the same energy into the city Detroit government, navigating budget, legislation, and the realities of governing one of America's most historical and significant cities. In this episode, we're going to talk about the city council actually does, the biggest challenges facing Detroit right now, and how neighborhood voices shape policy, and why local governments might be the most underrated arena in American democracy. If you've ever wondered how to move from protest to policy, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. And here's my conversation with Denzel McCampbell. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm glad to have Councilman Denzel McCampbell on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be excited to be on with you. Congratulations on the podcast as well.
Congratulations on being councilman.
Look at that.
I feel like that's a better one right now. Me and Denzel go way back into the distant future and distant past. And I was there when he was running for a different position, and to see him now to be councilman of Detroit is like really big. And I'm really excited for what he's going to do for the citizens of his district and the city of Detroit.
Thank you. And look, I appreciate our work together. Definitely built a foundation for where we are now. And also have been excited to just be watching all the great things you are doing as well. And I am really so excited for this podcast because I think your voice and also perspective and the folks that you're bringing on is needed. So congrats.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I want to get into the conversation straight away because there's a lot of tea we got to drop. But I want to start with describing your path into public service and what motivated you to run for city council, right? Detroit is a major, large city, right? People look at Detroit like, oh, it's a small. No. It's large. It's large. I lived in Detroit for a couple years. Like, to travel from one end to another end could be like a 45-minute trip in some circumstances. So for people to understand, like, what was your path to public service and what motivated you to run for city council?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, for the folks who are listening and not familiar with Detroit, we are the largest city in the state of Michigan. We are the engine of the state of Michigan and really the engine of the region here. We are international border city into Canada. We have the busiest international border in the country. And what I will say is that what got me into public service is really my parents. I tell the story that my mom was born and raised 25 miles outside of Selma, Alabama, during the Jim Crow era. She saw the hoses being turned on black folks, saw the dogs and really the brutality of black folks just simply for wanting to vote, right? My dad was born in Detroit. He retired from the UAW from Chrysler. My mom retired from the state of Michigan. I grew up in a union household, and they would take me to vote with them and just ask me like, oh, well, who do you think I should vote for? I don't know if they took my advice, right? They're this like 8-year-old snotty-nosed little boy. Said like, oh, I saw this day, right? So, but they really instilled in me the importance around voting, the importance around community, and also I think most important, the importance around caring and having empathy for other folks in our community. And that got me into really public service. I went to Michigan State University. Go Green for our Spartans out there.
Go Blue.
All right. But on campus there did a lot of LGBTQ organizing and really also organizing around holding the administration accountable to make sure that student voices were uplifted. But also this was before the Larry Nassar scandal. We saw instances where the university just was not doing what they needed to do to protect students, to invest in counseling, and really take sexual assault and relationship violence serious. And I was a sexual assault relationship violence peer educator on campus as well. And that is where I learned really the power dynamics and folks really having the power to take care of people, in that instance, students on campus, and making the decision to not do so. And we see that so often in government, that we have folks that need to be taken care of, that folks need to be uplifted, folks that need to have safety, that need to have affordable fresh food, that need to have a walkable communities, healthcare.
Yeah.
And folks have the ability to do so, but are deciding just simply not to. Whether that is because of corporate donors, whether that because of discrimination, bigotry, and that is really what got me into public service. I've worked in state government, on advocacy on state government. I worked on the Hill as a communication director for Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. I served as a charter revision commissioner for the city, which is our constitution to revise our charter here in Detroit. So I've done work on all levels of government and really ran for Detroit City Council because we need to make sure that our neighborhoods are being uplifted, that our seniors, that our children have what they need, our vulnerable communities are taken care of, that we have robust public transportation in the city, that we have true public safety that actually is about addressing the needs in our communities and not like throwing away, arresting people and throwing away the key or over surveillance of folks. And that we have development that actually answers the needs, whether that is, again, as I talked about, going out to get a nice cup of coffee at the end of your block, a nice meal, but also going to the pharmacy, going to the market locally. Those are the things that we have to focus on. And that's the little short view of my entry into public service.
Well, thank you for that. I think that's a great explanation of why people run, right? I think when people just say like, oh, I'm running for office, there's not a story behind it. They go like, oh, I want to fight against this and that. But your lived experience in the city of Detroit, your upbringing, your experiences led you to this point. So I want to talk about one experience growing up that's really shaped your work today. Like you went into office, you're like, this single experience is something I want to put and make sure is better for the citizens of Detroit.
Wow, that's a good question. One single experience.
It could be multiple experiences too.
I think it's my childhood in Detroit that really has shaped this. As I mentioned, I was born and raised on the city's east side, and this was before the economic downturn, which devastated the city. And when we talk about where housing is right now and us being in a housing crisis, when we look at the city of Detroit, we have folks who have owned their homes for decades, for generations, right? As folks moved up, the Great Migration up to Detroit to get those auto jobs in auto plants, folks own their homes. And then when we saw the economic downturn and the subprime mortgage, scandals, I would say, and folks making money off of folks needing just a leg up in that downturn, folks lost their homes. Also the overassessment of property taxes. And then that led to vacant homes, that led to blight, and it led to a lot of demolition. So we see that now that we have blocks that don't have homes on, or one or two houses. We have folks that are in need of homes. We have folks that are paying exorbitant amounts in rent that should actually be going towards a mortgage, or should not be paying a mortgage at all because they had homes that they were owning. So I connect that back to my childhood because we had blocks that were full, that were so I'll go back to start. So that I connected to my childhood because we have blocks up and down throughout the east side and throughout the west side that had folks full of families on those blocks, that you had young and old, you had kids on that block, you had schools that were open and neighborhood schools that folks could go to, you had services and I'm not saying it wasn't things that we could have improved on, but I look back on the challenges that we're having now in the city of having walkable neighborhoods, having the things that we need in our neighborhoods, and having the affordable housing available. And we can make a direct correlation back to that downturn and the really proliferation of home ownership and folks having those homes. So that's what drives me today. And I think we must come back from that. And I think we could do it in a way that's even better from what I experienced as a young child.
Thank you for that. And I want to go into like the meat more as we keep expanding on this. Is for listeners who are not familiar, what does city council do like day in and day out, right?
Yeah.
I kind of know, but I also kind of don't know. So I would love a great refresher, and I think my listeners would too.
Yes, so in the city of Detroit, we have what's called a strong mayor system. That means that our mayor has the runs, and our mayor is Mary Sheffield. the first woman, the first black woman to become mayor of the city of Detroit. A very historic election. And so we have a strong mayor system. So the mayor has her own administration. They carry out the functions of the city. So that's with our parks and recs, that's with public works, that's with the health department, these various ways that the mayor runs her administration. The city council is the legislative branch. So we make ordinances. We are the final approvers of the budget. We have investigatory powers. That word always trips me up. We are that co-equal branch in the legislative aspect. So as folks are thinking about the president has, or let's use the governor. The governor has various state departments that carries out the work of the state, right? Whether that is the Department of Health and Human Services, the Natural Resources Department and such. And then the legislature, between the House and the Senate, carries out the legislative part, drafting laws, passing the budget and such. That's similar in a way here on City Council. So the day in and the day out is that we meet weekly as a whole body. We have committee meetings. I chair the Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee, and also I'm the vice chair of the Public Health and Safety Committee. We are going into our budget season, so we are going to have a hearing on every single department and component of the city that gets funds.
Yeah.
We give power to bodies that do our planning. We give power to bodies that do our zoning and a review of that as well. So as you're thinking about that legislative aspect, the city council carries that out.
So how do budgets decide a city's level, and how does it like ripple down to residents' everyday life, right? I know like budget's always like a big talk, and like I know like school budgets to like city budgets to state budgets to national budgets, but like on a local level, how does that impact residents daily?
Yeah, and one of the goals that we have in our office is to even expand further on how do we make sure that folks are seeing the impacts of our budget and participatory budget, and I'll talk on that later. But I think folks really see, it's the local level that folks really see the impact of our budgets immediately. We're talking about budgets, we talk about day in and day out, we see a budget on how many folks are working to collect trash, right? Like to pave our roads, to fill in the potholes, right? We're talking about budgets on aspects on how many firefighters do we have to put out fires in homes across the city. We're talking about budgets on how many inspectors do we have to go around to ensure that buildings are safe for folks to go in. But we're also talking about budgets and services of like home repair dollars, right? How are we helping folks stay in their homes? Budgets around development. How are we helping small business owners and folks who want to actually help in the community get a leg up on that? So we are engaged in that budget process, not only when we're approving the budget, but also to have a aspect around following up. So in budget, finance, and audit, every week we're talking about, okay, here's a report on here's what's been spent. Here's the vacancies that we have. And what we see is that those vacancies then translate to, it may be an impact on service. So we're having to follow up to say, when will that be filled? When it comes to immigrant affairs, when it comes to disability affairs, when it comes to our civil rights and inclusion office, all of these, and the way that folks are getting service for the city and the protection from the city goes into the dollars that we put in the budget. And as I've talked about participatory budgeting, folks who are not familiar with that, participatory budgeting is actually giving, it could be through a district, it could be through a neighborhood, giving funds for residents to directly say, this is what we want to use it for. So for example, if we had $250,000 for a district, we would bring folks together to say, what is it that we want to see? Folks may say we need a park, or they may see that we need a community garden or some pocket parks, or they may say we want to see a placemaking play around a corridor that we can go and gather and sit, or a gazebo that we can have summer festivals at. People will come together, discuss that, and vote on it, and it will actually happen. So that is what participatory budgeting is as well. Or it could be services that they want to see more youth engagement and installations. It could be across the board, and really the direct aspect for folks saying, this is what we want to see, and let's implement it.
Awesome. So I want to ask a question that I think is important for a lot of different people right now is, what are some of the top challenges facing Detroit right now, and how are you Councilman Denzel McCampbell, going to tackle them, right? I know maybe housing affordability is an issue, expanding public transit could be an issue, community public safety with ICE roaming around like the undercover snatchers that they are, and ensuring reliable city services. So what are some of the issues you think are happening in Detroit and facing in Detroit? And how do you hope to address them in your role?
I think all of those are issues that we are coming across, and it is. I look at it as one. There are issues that we are needing to be proactive about and push. As you talked about housing, is making sure that people not only get affordable housing but stay in their homes and have adequate housing. That's why I talked about home repair. We are thinking about, as you look at public safety, how do we approach it in different ways? Funding robust community violence intervention programs, but also mental health programming in our city to make sure that folks are getting the help that they need, both physical health and mental health. As we think about folks being able to get around our city, people think of as Detroit as a motor city. We are the motor city, but that should not preclude, if you do not have access to a car, that should not preclude you from being able to get around, to get to your jobs, to get around to people, your friends, to get to church or where may have you, to get to your grocery store. So pushing for a robust public transportation system that is safe, reliable, and frequent. And all of those things, we have to realize that we cannot do it alone on the city level. And what we have faced and what we've seen is that we have a state government that has consistently cut our revenue sharing, which is money that comes from the state, there's also history that the state actually owes the city of Detroit hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue sharing.
I can see that.
Yeah, and then at the federal level, right, we know not only are we having to deal with, I call ICE a rogue terrorist organization.
As they are.
They are terrorizing our communities. So not only do we have to protect folks from that, but we also have a federal government that is hell-bent on harming cities like Detroit and people like the folks who live in Detroit. So how does that look? That is cutting funding from the programs that we depend on. That is cutting funding from cities like Detroit. That is targeting our students when we're thinking about, there's just a investigation, feds announced investigation to DPSCD for their attacks on additional crusade against LGBTQ folks. These are the things that we are having to not only say, how do we pull down the funds that are needed to tackle these services and programs, but also protect our folks. And we should not be faced with this with our own federal government, right? Yeah. We should not be faced with this for the folks that we have elected to go and serve our communities. And as a local elected official, then having to also talk to residents and see the deep need, and then really just feel like we're left on an island when we have to confront these issues. Those are the day-to-day realities that city councils, not only in Detroit, but across the country, are facing.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And there's two more questions I have that I think will definitely wrap up our conversation neatly with a bow. It's, why is representation on a city level so vital in Detroit today? As well as, what does it take for residents, especially young people, to engage with local government in a meaningful way? I
think representation is key because of our lived experiences. If we have a city council that has similar demographics, similar lived experience, come from similar areas of the city, that's why I'm a proponent for council by districts that we have now here in the city of Detroit. We have the risk of having a singular focus on how we approach and solve issues. Yeah. And it's not to say that that singular focus may be the wrong or right one. But I think if we have folks that are bringing different perspective, different lived experiences, different identities to the table, we are able to get to a more well-rounded, more robust solution to that. And have a conversation to say that, hey, we're having this conversation, but I don't see these folks at the table, right? Folks from this community. And we talk to folks from this side of the city, right? Are we making this information accessible through language access through ASL and what have you, right, in that accessibility aspect. So I think as we have more and more of that representation at the table, it makes for the policies that we draft and enact to be more robust in that. So I think that is key. And as we talk about young people and bringing more folks into the fold and being connected, is that we actually have to act on the concerns that people have. We cannot continue to just have a conversation like, oh, we see that. And that's something that I try to do in the face of what I shared earlier, that we need help from other levels of government to solve these issues, but that doesn't mean that we can't try to do something for folks right now.
Yeah.
That's why I lift up the need around constituent services. We have folks call in and day out about, hey, I'm having trouble getting access to this, or I'm facing this issue. So a lot of that is already there. So how do we connect the dots for folks to show folks that government can and should work on their behalf? But then also, how do we then go to the council table to say, let's be creative in solving this issue as well? And I think the more and more people that see that that is happening, to see that they have a voice in this and they have people listening to them, I think we increase the more and more people being able to say, oh, this actually does work on my behalf, and I should be involved with it, and I should get other folks involved with it as well.
Thank you. And just our final question, our final point that I want to like round home is, if listeners can take any big idea from this conversation about local government, what should it be? And what gives you hope about Detroit's future?
Do not ignore what's happening on your local government, on your local level. These are folks that probably are the most accessible in the way that you can go down to your city hall, you can go to your city council meetings, engage your city council as well, and your mayor, because you know, for better, you know, sometimes you hear folks say, "Oh, well, I haven't heard about that." Don't give them a reason to say that they haven't heard about it. Continue to engage on that, and know that we are the folks. We are making decisions that touch your lives every single day, and the more and more folks that get engaged around that, the more and more folks who are lifting up their voice to say, we need our budget to go to this. We need our budget to go to helping our people. We need our budget to go to building up our neighborhoods. We need our policies to reflect thriving neighborhoods and cities. The better off we will be. And I believe that change really starts at the local level, and it's one that folks can really touch and see the progress in real time.
Thank you so much, Councilman Denzel
Thank you.
McCampbell. And thank you for this conversation, giving your insight. I am wishing you the best, and hundreds and thousands of us are wishing you the best on your work in the city of Detroit. We see what you're doing. We see the work that you guys are putting in, and we hope for the best for the future of Detroit with you and your other council members in leadership.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're going to do this together. It really does. And it's not cliche. It takes all of us. No matter where you are, especially if you are in the city of Detroit, I look forward to seeing you at city council meetings or on Zoom. But if you're not in the city, there is a place for folks to get involved and get engaged. And I encourage folks to do so. Also, I encourage folks to run for office themselves, because we need more and more new voices in these spaces.
Agreed. Thank you, everyone. And that was our episode. Just want to say a big thank you again to Councilman Denzel McCampbell. That conversation was incredible. One thing that really stands out to me is how much power lives in local levels and how often it's overlooked. City councils set the budget. They influence development. They shape housing policy. They impact public safety and strategy. These aren't abstract debates. These affect people's daily lives. Episode resonated with you. That civil engagement does not start and end with presidential elections, then we did our job. As always, I'd love to hear from you and your thoughts. What issues in your city needs more attention? Who should we talk to next? Make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment and a like to support this channel. And let's continue the conversation together. Bye, friends.